You almost did it. This is the final part of the tutorial. And if you were to ask my buddy Bruno from TMS, this is also the most interesting part that he would say, because it's all about TMS Web Core and how you can hook it up to the books.json file that we previously created. So the first step, what we need to do is close all the pages, Yes, save everything. And then we close even this, and we select the web project. And the web project that I created is a normal TMS Web Core application. And then after creating it, I clicked on the form and I selected CSS library, CSS Bootstrap. So all the controls that are dropped on the form, I immediately prepared for working with Bootstrap. And I just recently published a video how to use Bootstrap with TMS Web Core. How it works with Holger, beginning of December 2023. That's where you have to look for that video. It's in the playlist. So with knowing all that, we just dropped a couple of combo boxes on the form. And the idea behind this application is it reads the JSON file from the server. I published it to a server, of course, my webpage. And it uses this information to create, first of all, the list of all books, for example, the FNC map books here. And then I can select the edition. This only has the paperback, so immediately it shows all the stores that it's available in. And for example, if I wanted to order it in Sweden, I can say select Sweden, go to Amazon, and it generates the URL so you can order the book in Sweden. Obviously, this is a 3-step process. First, the title, then the edition. For example, if I say the modern software development, and then the black and white edition in Australia, go to Amazon, and there we have it. There's the black and white edition in Australia. So this is what we'll develop now. And of course, we have to parse the JSON file. And I will use the same object structure that we already developed on the client, the same data transfer objects. That's why I call them data transfer object. I will use the very same unit, actually. I will use the same unit in the project. And that's the nice thing what we can do. I can use from the VCL project the U-types. That's the first step. I can use those. And I add to the form, to the main form, I called it form order, I think. Yeah, name form order. We add a data module. And adding this data module is something I do wrong every single time when I create a new project. So I'm going to show you again as well. You right-click your TMS Web Core application, and you do not go here and basically say, oh, we need a new web module or whatever. No, you click create a new TMS web module. Don't add a data module like I do all the time. Add a TMS web module. That's the way to do it. TMS provides this for you, because the difference is you have to derive from a different class. You can't derive from T data module. You have to derive from T web data module. And if you don't do that pretty early, everything will break. Like you can't compile a T data module. That's the problem. It has to be a T web data module. And you also need the right uses class. So do not rely on creating a data module. Don't do it wrong. Do it right. This way, I stumble about that every time. That's why I pointed out this explicitly in this video once again. I really want to make sure that you create the right template. I really want to make sure that you use the right template for the job. Looking at the data module, there is only one thing on the form, which is a web request. There is a video that shows you how to use the web request. Again, how it works with Augur or other TMS videos. And the most detailed instructions you will find, of course, in my web core book, 2nd edition. And the URL is the only thing I set or need to set, so to speak, to where the book resides. That's nice. It's deployed. So this is static. I won't ever have to change this. This is where Holger publishes the list of his books. So very similar to a use case you could have. And the response type, I changed that to RT-JSON so that I get a JSON document back. Command is get, all very simple. Events, nothing is implemented because we're not going to use events. Instead, we're going to use the new functionality that's provided. So when the application starts, more or less, we want to request all the books, right? So I write a message procedure, request books. And in this case, I implemented the way to use the not the asynchronous. In this case, I did not choose the await way. I picked a closure because it's just quicker this way, in my opinion, way more straightforward for the event handling that I want to attach to it. So, because if the books have been retrieved from the server, I call f on books ready. F books on ready is a property that is tied to on books ready, and that's nothing but an event. So t-notify event here is on books ready, and that gives me the ability on our order form, if we go to on books ready here, to basically do what needs to be done when the books are ready. So I start the application, and let's see, if you go to the create, I hide all the controls. I'll show you how I do that. I create the service manager because the data module is not created by default. I disabled that, so I create the service manager here, the data module. I called that service manager. So the class is tService manager. I create that. When I start the application, assign it to a field variable, fmanager. It's defined in my form here. Fmanager is tService manager. And I assign on books ready, not the same. This is an implicit self in front of it. So the on books ready method here on this main form is getting called when the manager triggers the event on books ready, which I do when I downloaded the books from the internet. If the books aren't there, or if the internet isn't there, you will never see the user interface. And this is exactly the use case that I want to have. Imagine this being part of a bigger web page, just like a tiny little embedded section. If there's an error with it, it's just going to stay empty. You know, you could add error management or whatever, or add a text or something. Not the case here. It's just not going to show anything. And then, of course, after assigning the event, I have to actually call request books on the manager. So when I show that request books, what does it do? It simply executes the request. Request is the component here. And I have the URL. I don't need to specify it. I have the response type. And the method that I use is using the HTTP response proc, which is a callback. And the type of that is an anonymous method, procedure, a response, which contains the response as a string, if you want it as a string, and information about the request. We don't care about the request in this case at all. So we just say process response. What do we pass in? A request response. And let's look at a request.response. It's a JS value. It only works, and let me point this out, this only works because we set the response type to RT-JSON. That way it gets populated. That way we get in a request.response the JS value of the response, our document, so to speak. And I pass that to process response. And process response expect the JS value and will then deserialize the JSON manually. Why manually? And this is the point where you should write an email to TMS, because TMS Web Core can't deserialize to objects yet. So that might be something for a feature request. So we have to literally go through the data structure of the JSON and manually basically transfer the content from the JSON document into our object structure. But at least we can use the same object structure that we had before. So fpayload, I clear anything that might have been there before. So fpayload is actually defined as a field in the service manager. And hopefully, this is always the fun part when you record these videos, hopefully I did initialize it correctly. Yes, I did. fpayload equals nil. And if you wonder why don't you free it when we free the data module, well, Don't really need to, but I should. There we go. So if we free the data module, I free the payload. So the processing looks totally convoluted. I agree with you. And it should be easier. It is easier in that's literally the one thing where you could say TMS Web Core has room for improvement. This is it. I agree. But still, and this is the thing, it's still better than a lot of other web frameworks. Still, it takes a little bit of work typecasting the right classes the right way. So what we'll have to do is, first of all, we create the payload, and then we get the root item, which is an object. Why is it an object? Let me show you. We go here, and look at this. This is an object. This is a new object. And the object is our payload. It has stores, and it has the books, right? So that's our object, TJS object in TMS Web Core. So at this point, LRoot is a TJS object, and thank God for FPC, we can't use inline variable declaration because the free Pascal compiler creators think it's not appropriate for the Pascal language to have it. So we need to declare everything up top. So LRoot, basically the TJS object, has to be declared here in front, and we can't use, unlike in Delphi, I want to point this out, you can't do var LRoot. That's not supported because TMS Web Core relies on the free Pascal compiler, Pass2JS, and that does not support inline variable declaration. And that's why you have to declare everything like this up here instead of being able to do it like in Delphi now to nicely inside of the code, which makes much more sense in this case, in my opinion. But it's very cumbersome to jump down and up instead of having the variable declaration close to where you use it. And you only use these things literally like once in order to transfer stuff from A to B, and then it can run out of scope, which is one of the nice things that you get with inline declaration. So LRoot is now our payload object as a JSON. So we can get the array of all the stores by reading the stores property from LRoot. With that, we can iterate the array. Length is the property. That's how it works with these TJS arrays. And we can get for each element a store object. Again, this is a TJS object. This is not a Delphi object. Again, that we create with lstore, tstore, DTO create. That's the object. And then we have to transfer, and this is what I think could be automated in some way. We have to transfer all these things for each and every property over manually. So we have to consider, is it an integer? We call JavaScript to integer, and then we read the ID. We call JavaScript to string. We read the domain and pass it into domain. And here you also see the difference. This is all capitalized. This is Pascal syntax, and this is like camel case, which a lot of other languages use. And this is very important. It has to match. It is case sensitive on this side. Not on this side. This is Pascal. It isn't case sensitive, but the strings are case sensitive. And with that, you add the store to the payload. And you have to do the same for the books. You read the books into an array, you iterate the array, and you transfer all the information. One more thing, the publication date, as I said, is ISO to date, is a function that is part of the BCL. I've had some discussions with TMS about this, and they are working on providing this as part of TMS Web Core. I'm actually quite sure when you listen to this, it might already have been added. So look up if there is a function to transfer an ISO string, like something like this, 2023, 12/30th. That's when I'm recording this. Basically, if you can transfer this into a T-date time or T-date, so there has to be something like this as part of TMS Web Core. Right now, I have to use the BCL utils, which are included in the BIS library. If you, for example, have Xdata or Aurelius, you have access to that. With that in mind, I can basically take the ISO to date. I still have something in here that was needed previously. I can take the whole thing now. I made a mistake previously serializing it, so I can take the whole publication date, title, subtitle, and description. And now the biggie. That's really the biggie. How to decode the base 64. You don't decode the base 64. That's the trick. You just take the string from the cover. So that's your base 64 encoded string. And then you prefix that with data, image / JPEG. You saw me correct it because previously I had a PNG, JPEG, and then semicolon, base 64, comma, and then you add that. And what that does is an URL. And this is a URL that contains an image. And that is actually something you could actually enter this. I showed this at the TMS days in May. You would be able to enter this into the address bar of your browser and you would get a picture. That data URLs are basically the resources of the web. So you can add your base 64 content to after the comma. And the coolest thing is that you can assign this as a URL to the image component in TMS Web Core. So this is what the cover data URL property is used for in the book structure that we defined. And that way we can simply very, very easily show the images in the client. So we have to do the same thing. I'm not going to explain it in detail. We have to do the same things with the edition, get the array, and then the same thing here with the integers for the stores that we have, all well and done. So the final thing for us to do is literally look at how that works in the user interface. And the user interface, as we said, like it requests the books, and when the books are requested, we trigger, let me show that again here, not in the process here, but the call to the in request books, the call to the event is actually here when we're done. We process a response and then we call, if the event is assigned, we call the event method with a parameter of self. So here we have to look for the implementation on books ready, and that calls update interface. Makes sense, right? So we update the interface, and what we do is we delete the list of titles in the combo box, and then we can literally iterate the payload books count -1 and get the book, and then we add the title of the book to the combo box. And again, we use add object. We had that previously with an integer. In the VCL example, we add a object, T objects. We can add anything that is derived from T object, which is in Delphi any object, right? So we can add our book right there. So we have a reference to the book associated with our element in the combo box. Wonderful thing that is able to be done with TMS Web Core. I, out of the top of my head, don't know any framework, web framework that allows me to do something like that easily. So with that, you have your combo box item with a reference to the book. Great. And then we basically say the combo box with the titles is visible when the items are more than 0. So basically, if we have an element, we make it visible. And if we are visible, then please select the first title in the list. The list is ordered still by publication. So you will see the book that has been published last first, and it will be selected. And then we call update editions, which we also call if you click on a book. So update editions will then update the second combo box, which will show the editions. And this is boilerplate code, same thing. We update the cover because if we have a book selected, we can load the cover. That is something I'm going to explain in great detail. But this here is, after this, always the same thing. So we can get the book because the book reference is the selected title, and we can cast this to tbook.dto. And then we have the instance of the book because it's selected item in the book combo box has a reference to the book that is selected. And this is the major advantage with TMS Web Core if you work with classes and objects derived of those classes, that you don't have to fiddle around with IDs and other stuff. You can work with objects like in Delphi or Delphi, whatever you prefer. I usually prefer Delphi. I don't know why I said Delphi. And maybe I talked to Ian Barker recently that he talks about Delphi all the time. Okay, so, and this is the reference to the book. That's how easy it is with TMS Web Core. And I can't emphasize this enough. Actually, I'm going over it a second time now with you. The ability to have objects and classes is worth so much, you have no idea. Other, like JavaScript and all these things, and you see it here. Like, if you go back to the object manager, this is the kind of stuff you work with when you work with pure JavaScript. Like, you have objects that don't have strict variable names, and it's not as nice, and you simply don't have a compiler that checks everything. And I don't trust myself, so I don't like interpreter languages. I need a compiler, and that's why I like TMS Web Core so much, because it gives me a compiler to develop my web applications. And with the book, I can then look up the editions, because the editions are a list on the book, right? Book has editions, so we can iterate that list, and we do the same thing. We add the title of the edition and the name of the edition to the combo box of editions, and we keep a reference to that edition. So when I'm not going to show this in detail, so when we click on the edition, we can load the stores. And we only load the stores for the edition that is selected. Easy peasy, right? So that works really great. So the last two things I have to show you, if we initialize the form, we hide everything. How did I do that? Hide everything. So hide everything is, again, because it's TMS Web Core, makes it so cool. TMS Web Core, you have a form, right? T form order. So T web form is derived of T form. So guess what? We have component count. And component count allows us to iterate all the components on a form. Components, and controls. T control are the visual controls are the visual components, or the controls. You know, I always struggle with myself. Do I really call them visual components or control? So you check if the component is a control. And that is a little bit OOP, polymorphy for you. I go into that in great detail in the modern software development with Delphi, when we restore form states of a form and states where the components are located and stuff. I explain that in great detail if you're interested. So I'll look if the component is a T-control, and if it's a T-control, I create a T-control, C T-control, and then I set visible to false. Okay? If I were not having this check for T-control, let me just show you. If you try self, components, I.visible. Components are non-visual controls. They don't have a visibility property, just like they don't have height, right, or top or width, whereas C has a visible property, and C also has a height and a top, you know, everything. So that's the reason why we check first, is it a control? And if it is a control, I can typecast to control. And again, because it's free Pascal compiler that does not believe inline variable declaration is a thing that you need in 2024, you need to declare this up here and can't comfortably write var C and get rid of that up there to basically break your train of thoughts that you have to go up there again. So sadly, we have to do that. Yeah, with that in place, we can simply say C.visible is false. As we iterate all the components on the form, after calling that, all the controls and all the controls will be hidden. That's it. So all the other ones, when you select, when they set visibility to true, they just slowly but surely show the form depending on what you select. That's the idea behind everything. So much for hiding and showing stuff. So I said two things remain but actually it had been 3. So I haven't talked about the button either, but before going to that, let's look at the cover image, because that is surprisingly easy, to be honest. But the key is to prepare your data the right way for your user interface, right? In a nutshell, that's what, for me, is the biggest difference between Model View Controller and MVVM, Model View View Model, because the view model prepares the model for the view much more than Model View Controller really did, to be honest with you. So I'm more accustomed to the latter now. But here's the thing, how it works. So as soon as we have a book selected, we get the book from the list and we check if the cover data URL is empty. It is empty when we don't have a cover image provided, and then the cover data URL is empty. And cover data URL really contains the URL, the combination of the base 64 with the prefix that I explained previously. And then we just can set the URL of the image to that cover data URL. That's it. I always show the image because it's hidden by default, because everything was hidden. So we need to show it. But that just blew my mind, to be honest with you. If you have a data URL, how easy it is with TMS Web Core to show an image. And the best thing is TMS Web Core offers also FNC components. FNC is multi-platform. So if you use the image component from there, you can even resize and do all sorts of stuff. Or like the slider component where you can switch between different images. The possibilities are endless. And being able to read this from a JSON, even if the JSON refers to the image, then you have to do an additional request. Still, it's not going to break your neck. It's still going to be straightforward if you use objects like this. So this is significantly more or easier, I say. And with regards to the reference URL, now that I look at this, of course, you could simply specify the URL and then the component would download the image for you, but you would have less control about resizing everything. So there's pros and cons to both approaches, but here we assign the data URL so you can embed the image inside of your JSON and you don't have to reference another server or anything like that. So finally, the final step is the button that opens up the Amazon page. And again, the only hard-coded thing is the Amazon, and then the domain, DP, and then we have the Amazon ID from the edition. So what we need to do, we need to go and get the store that is selected, right? And then we need to get the edition. How do we get the edition? Well, the edition is selected in the combo box above that. And after doing that, we can get the URL for the Amazon store and then navigate. That's a command of the application, navigate, and you specify the URL. And then the target, an empty blank, opens it on a different tab. That's all there is for the button. And I think this example, if you look at the length of the code, so the main form, so this is just declarations basically that don't really count for me. So if you look from 40 to 220, so that's, for me, that's like 180 lines of code that you have to type, where a lot of the code is declaration and implemented. So let's say 200 lines of code for the main form. And then the service manager is literally the main part parsing the JSON. So it's all really straightforward. In a perfect world, TMS in 2024 is gonna email us and say, hey, we finally made it easier to parse your JSON. And then we're literally done in an hour or two to write a nice TMS web core client that processes our JSON either from our web services or from our DCL applications like you've seen in this tutorial series. And we have great user interfaces based on Bootstrap with graphical elements like images, and build it in no time with nice, maintainable code that is written in a language that we've been using for years. So maybe I'm still recording this in 2023, so I'm literally gonna include that in my prayers for 2024, that TMS is gonna make JSON handling a little bit easier. And maybe my prayers are heard, I don't know. And with that in mind, I can only leave you with the impression of this long tutorial, which led us from a VCL application with T data sets, T data sources, lots and lots of queries. And then we moved over creating a markdown document, which is published on the internet. We created a JSON document, and then this JSON document is being read by a TMS web core application. And finally, this tutorial scratches the surface. And I said this in the beginning, and I think at the end I'm allowed to introduce this one more time, that modern software development with Delphi is going to go beyond what you've learned here. It's going to go deeper. And the video course that is going to be available soon, based on the book is going to be a second source of the information. So the book is definitely going deeper than just us here scratching the surface. It's going to focus on, as you can see here, TMS Aurelius for object relational mapping. It's going to show you how to build reports with TMS Flexel, and you're also going to build an API with TMS XData. However, TMS XData is not as slim or little a product that it could be like just pushed into a book about modern software development. So if you loved seeing TMS Web Core in action in this example and want to learn more, this is the ultimate reference for TMS Web Core. And the reason why it's the ultimate reference is it's so far thankfully the only book, so for me, thankful, of course, only book that is available for TMS Web Core. So this is Web Application Development with Delphi. Be sure to pick up the second edition, which was released in 2023. If you want to read it in German, there is an edition which was published in 2020. Obviously, it doesn't contain the new features of the new version. This book also has additional content, how you deploy your applications, and even how you deploy your stuff in Docker. And how it came over here, it also has an introduction to XData, how you can use it with existing databases. If you want to go deeper with XData, go to cross-platform multi-tiered database application, which gives, again, building an XData web service from scratch for 8 million records in the database and still perform well. This also has another report with Flexel, has a web application, has a multi-platform application with FireMonkey. This is cross-platform development and XData in the mix. Not so much the focus on web development. And then if you say, well, I could use mapping in my applications, well, this is FNC Maps, this book. This has everything about adding maps to your desktop applications, web applications with routing, directions. Everything's in there. This encompasses the whole mapping idea in Delphi. And finally, the book about TMS grids, Advanced String Grid, and the database version TDB Advanced Grid. And again, another great example for using XData and TMS Web Core. Again, and also TMS Web Core, Miletus is introduced here for the first time, how you can build desktop applications built on web applications. So this is definitely something that you should have a look into as well. Sorry for the little bit of advertisements in the end, but hopefully after watching this long tutorial, you appreciate that in addition to just video tutorials, you also have written literature available. And of course, there's so many more videos on TMS Software TV. How it works with Holger is just a part. There is webinars from other engineers from TNS. There's videos from Jolt, from Bruno, from Wagner, from Adrian. There's so many other videos that you definitely want to subscribe to. So click the subscribe button and also always click the bell. I think that is the subscribe button, that you get notified when there's new videos released. And also, please give us a thumbs up if you like this video, and also comment what you would like to see more of, what you would like to see less of, whatever comes to your mind, please comment to this video. And as I record this in 2023, take care, take safe, and all the best for your future Delphi development software projects.